Yesterday, I asked you a question. What if there was a third way? Now, if you just tuned in, I want you to know last hour I was talking about how important it is for the president to follow through on what he just tweeted today. He listed 4 things Minnesota has to do, and that is enforce the law, turn the criminals over to the feds, work with the federal government to get the criminals. And I don't think they're going to do it, but he is setting them up to make that choice. And I think the reason why they're not making this choice, they're not going to make that choice to go along, is I really think they are in real trouble with all of the things that are going on with all the things that are going on with fraud. And now people like Cam Higbee and Data Republican are exposing all of the hidden networks. This is all coming undone, and they are freaked to the core. The soldiers, the foot soldiers, the ones who believe, in the Turtle Island nonsense, those people are freaked to the core, and I think the politicians are freaked to the core. And he must have something else going on. Otherwise, we're going to start paying attention to all of the fraud that is happening, and that will only hasten his journey to jail. But yesterday, I asked you, can we stay as a people? Is there a third way? Because there is maybe 30% of the population that is still gettable. And I don't mean winnable. I mean salvageable. We have to look, when this is all over, and it will end one way or another, it's going to end. And we know how it ends in Marxist terms. If Marxists win, what do? In the end, anybody who wasn't with them, they line them up and they shoot them. That's what happens. Same thing with Islamists. They line you up and shoot you. Same thing with anarchists. They shoot you. So we know how that side's going to end. How does our side end? If indeed our side, the Constitution, is supreme, you can't shoot people that disagreed with you. You can put people who broke the law and were tried and justice stood, and it wasn't rigged or anything else. It was just real justice. Those people, they go to jail. But the people who are on the sidelines, you got to get them back into the fold. We have to come back together. Otherwise, this is just going to happen over and over again. And you will, one way or another, you'll be in civil war. You'll be at each other's throats forever. And that's not the United States of America. And it's not a world that I want to live in. It's not the country I want to pass to my kids. I want to pass my kids a better country, a more stable world. Okay. So the only way to do that is what Martin Luther King called reconciliation. So yesterday I asked, what if there was a third way, a group of people that were dedicated to truth and justice, who would use their bodies in an overtly peaceful way, not to shout slogans, hate, or even judge or spit back on people who are spitting on them. Just stand locked in arms to stand as a border between ICE agents and these violent insurrectionists, okay? And stand and protect the police. But not doing it with hatred. People who are willing to do what Martin Luther King did. Be willing to take a club to the head. Okay? Be willing to take a fire hose opened up on you. Dogs unleashed. That is extraordinary. But it's going to take something extraordinary that the average person who is just casually watching, think of your children. Think of if you have kids in college. I talked to my kids. I talked to them yesterday, and Cheyenne was talking about, how she had heard this and this and this. And I'm like, no, honey, be careful. That's not true. This is true. This you have right. This is not correct. Most people don't have time to do what I do for a living. And quite honestly, most people don't take the time to do what you're doing right now and actually go try to find somebody that will tell you the truth as they understand it, back it up with the facts. And so most people are just being duped. They're just being duped. They don't know what they believe. They don't know what the real facts are. So something has to happen that is so extraordinary that the average person on both sides is almost dumbfounded. You look at something, you're like, wait, these people are willing to stand for what they believe in and never punch back. It's got to be something so far out of human nature that it's either group insanity or a God thing. MLK called this nonviolent resistance, and he said it was the only road to reconciliation. Okay. But just like in the 1960s, most people are not interested in that. They want justice. They want people behind bars. They want people paying for what they've done. I get it. I feel that way. I want them, and there must be people to go to jail. But the problem is not the average person on the other side. It's those who are behind the protesters. You know, I know there are many in the streets that are, as I've been calling them, Turtle Island people that believe that, you know, North America is Turtle Island. It was stolen, and the American empire needs to be destroyed. America is the worst thing that has ever happened, and it must be wiped off the face of the earth. Okay. I don't think that's your average Democrat, do you? Okay. But they're almost under this spell because and I'm going to be honest with you, both sides are a little bit, okay? And you're no longer able to think straight. We become so tribal in this country that if you're not 100% with me, you're my enemy. Well, that's not true. I've got to be able to hold two things at once that can be true. Two things can be true at once. So the first thing we have to do is separate in your mind the opposition. Who we're talking about in Minneapolis, the true insurgents, the true Marxists, the Turtle Island believers that want to destroy and take down America, and the politicians who think they can control those people for their own power and are corrupt, okay? And then there's the people that don't believe in any of that, but have slowly been cooked in the stew of injustice. You know, most cops are bad. Trump, as well as you and I, we're Nazis. Okay? They don't want to overthrow the U.S. They just think we're Nazis, and so they got to stop the Nazis. You know, they believe they're standing against fascism, but I can guarantee you they can't even really define fascism. But that's where they are. So how do you convince those people that we're not fascists? Well, send in more troops. Bring in the troops and arrest them in the streets. Shout by, you know, that's not going to, by doing what the real believers, Turtle Island people, are telling them that we will do, which they will then just turn around and use as proof of concept to their followers and just get them in deeper. That's not a good plan. Not a good plan. And it's not enough just to not do that. We have to do something so radical that it breaks the narrative, something that makes everyone in the world stop and say, what the heck is this? What is happening? These people are getting beaten in the head and they're not fighting back. Instead of fighting back, they're forgiving those who beat them. That's Gandhi. That's MLK. That's Jesus. That's the apostles. That is why Christianity grew and changed the world, and Islam had to conquer the world with swords and beheadings and bombs and blood. Okay? One direction asks you to sacrifice yourself or your children, but the elite never do it. The other side says, everybody love one another. I read the comments from glennbeck.com/torch, the insiders, yesterday, when I mentioned this yesterday. 40% agreed with me, but wondered with me, do we have enough people, and 350 million people, do we have enough people that would do that? That really have the discipline to do it like Martin Luther King would have done it? Do we have the pastors that would do it? I can guarantee you every pastor, if you're a pastor and you're listening to me now, why are you dismissing this? Why are you dismissing this possible calling to this? Guarantee, because you're not sure what will happen to your congregation. You don't know what will happen to your tithing. You don't know what will happen to your church. You have bills to make. You have all this stuff. What's the real reason? Okay. Now, 60% of the audience yesterday told me, and I completely understand this, it's too late. They're beyond saving. If you stood there with love, you'd be beaten and possibly killed. And I can understand why people feel that way. I really do. And the last comment might actually be true. But the comments, it's too late and they're beyond saving, feels true because I and you have watched lies harden into identity. You know, we've seen our own families fracture. We've lost somebody that we love, not to death, but to politics. And so hope feels really naive and even dangerous. I want you to know, I know that pain personally. There's at least one empty chair at my table, and not because of distance, not because of time, but because of politics. And I have to tell you, I don't care what the reason is. I don't want to win. I don't need an apology. I don't need to be told I was right. I don't need any of that. I just want those individuals back at my table. That's all I want. That's reconciliation. The other thought that was expressed by really reasonable people in this audience was, you will never change the left. Now, let me say something really shocking here. I 100% agree with that. You'll not change the left. That's why I'm not talking about the left. The left, those who really, the Turtle Island, they need to go to jail. But that's why we have to talk honestly about reconciliation, because I don't think people really understand what that is. Reconciliation does not mean reconciling with everyone. It never has. I don't remember the videotape and the sessions where Martin Luther King reconciled with the Klan, sitting down with people in hoods going, you know what? We just got to find some common ground here. I mean, he didn't negotiate with people who had already chosen hate as their God. Okay. There was no reconciliation there. What he risked his life to do was for something far more precise. He reached the people who had been pulled into the movement on the other side, even if they didn't fully agree with the worst parts. So people who didn't wear the robes, but they tolerated them. They're like, I don't like those people. I don't like what they stand for, but it's a good cause and I'm square behind it. You can't pick who you're with. Okay. Those people, they were not evil. They were not evil. That's as I said yesterday, they were like many of our grandparents or great-grandparents that were living in a different time. They were not evil. They were under a spell, and spells don't break because somebody shouts facts at you. They don't break because you are arguing with them. They break when reality intrudes. When people see dogs turn loose, when they see fire hoses aimed at children, when they saw brutality laid bare. That wasn't about humiliating the other side. That was about revealing the truth so clearly that decent people could no longer look away. And that's the part we're missing today. It's not universal. It is conditional. And reconciliation happens after the spell breaks. When somebody goes, wait, how the heck did I end up here?